I had, of course, heard of Sushila Rani Patel a lot. She was some 20, 30 years ago, reasonably well known. She used to give annual music concerts. So I had heard of it, and I had heard of Film India as a magazine. Anyone who knows about cinema of that time will know. I was researching for my first book, and somebody told me that she had a whole library worth of Film India. So I said, let me go to her and ask her whether she would let me research. And as I found out later, and as I found out then also, she was an extraordinarily generous person. So she said, here's the key of the library, please sit and research as much as you want to. So I sat, it was like a gold mine. For my limited objective, it worked really well. But then I said there is something more to it, and I suggested to her. Now, it turned out that she was waiting to suggest it to me, that, I have this, why don't you look at writing a history of the magazine and write a history about me and my husband. Now, her husband, being this colorful, I would say notorious man, was a perfect subject for a book. So we discussed it for months, and I was busy with something. She kept on saying, please do it, please do it. In retrospect, I should have started right away. And I sat, I asked her questions continuously for about 6 months. Her memory was unbelievable. She would keep notes for me. The book, the magazines of 50 years worth of magazines yielded fantastic information. His answers, his articles, it was all there. All I had to do was to reconstruct and put it all together. So I said yes, and InterSource came in on board, and it's just began, the project began, and then just rolled on from there. And I must just say that, normally a lot of people who want to talk about their lives tend to either embellish or not talk or have forgotten. But in her case, neither of those things happened. She was willing to be quite frank, I must tell you. Now, Patel, in today's day and age, would be considered a rock star journalist. His readers loved him. They wrote letters to him by the thousands. Sushila Rani told me that they used to drop in at home in the office. They always got a cup of tea. And he was, shall we say, free, frank, and fearless, and not a little undiplomatic. He said what came up to his mind. If the film did not meet his expectations, and he had very, very rigorous standards of the content, not the technicals, the content. If it was anti-Indian culture, it had to be demolished. If it was pro-Indian culture, however regressive, and it was a terrible film, a little bit of praise. So that was the film review part. Secondly, he did not care if he was writing about his friend or his foe. In his reviews, in his question answers, in his articles, close friends of his like Mehboob Khan or Dilip Kumar got a drubbing. He said Dilip Kumar overacting as usual. He said things about women which would be considered impossible to say, much less print. They were, in today's parlance, really sexist. But then I discovered that he was equally rude about the men. So he was a completely outrageous kind of writer. But it all came from a perspective. And the perspective is very clear that if a journalist is not honest in his comments, then what is the use? And that, in an environment where there were a few other film magazines, and later on Filmfare also came about, in an environment where everything was very diplomatic, that really made him very, very unpopular with the stars and popular with the readers. I think as a journalist, the thing I admire about him is his connect. I think that's very, very important. A reader and a writer must have some kind of connect intellectually and otherwise, and he connected with the reader. I was told that they used to get something like 2,500 letters per week. Sushila Rani said she sifted through each and every one of them. I find that a bit difficult to believe, but they did go through a lot, and he answered over about 12 pages or 15 pages, so you can well imagine once a month. And the questions were anything and everything. The people asked him about his personal life, of the star's personal life, what he thought about the politics. A man of many, many dimensions, and he answered all of them very, very frankly. So that's what I think made Baburao Patel a real editor who understood the pulse of his reader.
So I've always been interested in the processes and the historic context of cinema, what it stands for. Indian cinema has a glorious history. It comes from our cultural and theatre traditions. We were among the earliest in the world. So the earlier part of that history, even now, but of course the earlier part of that history, I think needs much more recording, much more writing. I, like everybody else of my generation, no television and no internet, grew up watching a movie once a week, then twice a week, and I got interested in the songs, in the whole process of putting together film. And as time went on, also in the paraphernalia, posters, stills, maybe some trivia. And a few years ago, I started realizing that there was much more to a film, many more stories to be told. What was happening in the country at that time, for example? How do you understand a film like, say, Mother India, without understanding India of the time? So those are issues that started interesting me. And I started writing a few articles here and there, but about 5 or 6 years ago wrote my first book on Ketan, and since then I have written a few more books.
Hindi cinema underwent a lot of change in terms of technique, content, music. Can you talk to us about that?
So he started the magazine in 1935. Obviously, silent cinema had just ended. Talkies had just begun. So there's that transition is one important transition. Then by the 40s came the concept of stars. Between 30s to the late 40s were the concept of the studios. That means people were employed by the studios. They took a salary and they did work. They were like any other office goer. By the late 40s, the stars had begun to emerge, a new generation of stars, and the studios were shutting down. If you read old issues of Filmindia, you get to see people who became big stars making their debuts. It's very fascinating to see. There is a new youngster who has just entered films called Yusuf Khan, Dilip Kumar, and then you realize that in a few years he's going to become this big star. And that happened over generation. I remember reading somewhere that a new girl is going to be introduced in Guru Dutt's film CID, and that turned out to be Vaida Rahman. So that was one fascinating journey. Technically, of course, cinema changed a lot. Playback singing came, so you can see that happening in the magazine. Then one also got to read about color coming in. So, whole lot of changes. Some things actually have remained the same. The whole idea of the star being at the center of a film is there. The photographs of the star being sent to the magazine in all kinds of beautiful poses. That I see way back going to the 1930s and 40s. Beautifully shot in studio lighting. So the whole focus being on the faces rather than everything around the face. The music, the song, all important, but the face, that is something that has not changed. In fact, it's only going bigger. So I think we can say that while the star system may have altered a bit, the star per se has remained one constant of cinema.
This is on technology, but
actually I would say the skill required at that time was much more because the technology available was so new and so I would say in today's parlance old-fashioned and rudimentary. No, the background singing, playback singing was not on in practice till the 40s. So you had these situations where the actors moved from place to place, and behind the trees the musicians were sitting. Somebody once told me that the whole origin of why love songs are sung around trees is that because the musicians were behind the trees. Um, People did their own playback singing. Till Noor Jahan, everyone was doing their own playback singing. Suraya continued to do playback singing. And only when the playback singers came in did that change. Today, every shot that is taken is being watched on the monitor, is immediately seen by the star. If he or she does not approve or the director does not approve, they can shoot it. You can't do that with so much film wastage. The dubbing is done. No outdoor voice recording is ever done. So that's why when you see, I find that a bit artificial because there's no kind of richness to the sound. But that's how they do it. Editing patterns have changed. I think technology has made things much easier. To me, maybe this is an old-fashioned approach. The cinema of it has become a little more controlled and artificial. The storytelling has become a little more controlled and artificial. And the storytelling of a lot of old films, you don't need. I mean, even today, I can't imagine anyone putting together a film like Avara or Mughal Azam with the rudimentary kind of machines that they had. The camera had to be shifted, the huge cameras, huge lights. The light has to be perfect, and all that being done in those days. So I think more study is required to see how they carried off and created these masterpieces.
And they were gorgeous. And you reproduced them in your book. Tell us a little more about.
So, for one thing, today's posters are all computer generated. Of course, there's art involved and skill involved. All the posters of the past are first hand painted and then done on offset. And even before offset, perhaps on whatever the printing technology was. They are brittle. Paper is very, very brittle. And that's why they tear easily because you have to publish them print them in the thousands. But I find them art in some ways. Today, great posters are being made, but so much extra thought is being made to make the poster look different that I feel sometimes they begin life, the movie begins its life with a poster. Say, yeah, this poster looks good, this name looks good, hey, let's make a movie out of this. Rather than the other way around to say, and those posters also had a logic, the face, the positioning of the face, one particular scene somewhere is stuck. Even the 70s poster when you see, I'm always reminded of the poster of a film called Dawn, in which Amitabh Bachchan is running. That's all. There's nothing else in it. He's running. And it conveys to you the idea that there is somebody who's a fugitive of some sort. And that one messaging is. So, I find posters today concentrating a lot more on trying to be a bit artistic, but somehow not always conveying messages. Of course, they're great posters, but those old posters are pure art. Our book, The Patels of Filmindia, has got fantastic posters, has got fantastic stills, and great ads of the 30s and 40s. I think I had the most fun looking at the advertising. I had the most fun looking at the advertising in the magazine because it told me. I think we have used in the book, I'm not sure, a great ad for Indian Railways about how you can pay a lump sum and travel the country. It's wonderful.
Great reviews, it's been very well received. And it's been referred to as a collector's item. Why is that?
I think authors must say nice things about their book, but happily reviewers have said nice things about book. Those who have purchased it have had a tremendous amount of feedback. They say that they find it a collector's item simply because it's history, because of the images, because of the content of where else between the covers of a book would you get such remarkable content of reviews of the 40s, 50s, 60s of films. The internet does not have answers for everything. I mean, you might get an old poster here, an old review there, an old article there. But when all that is done and it's a beautifully designed, beautifully produced book, so and I must say that there is a community of collectors out there who realize the value of such books, where not just the content but also the looks, the design, the feel. I mean, we do know the effort that has gone behind it. Our designer has put in so much effort, and the whole book is a pleasure to hold and read. Think about it. 20, 30 years from today, all that is available in this book, even that won't be handily available. It's not going to be around. So therefore, somebody who's interested obviously will think of it as a collector's item.
You mentioned just now about having fun with the ads in the book. So there are ads about the railways and soaps and even Babu Rao's homeopathic medicine.
Yes.
So could you talk a little
So
about
Babu Rao Patel, as I said, was a man of many parts, and later in his life started practicing homeopathy, and therefore he's got ads where in his own magazine, naturally, in color, for people to come, and he used to dispense medicine to whoever came. I seem to recall Sushila Rani telling me that he didn't charge, which is, I think, fully believable. There are ads for, if you have noticed, there is an ad, I think, which has been used in the book on how to apply for and get a telephone connection. Then there is an ad for a lot of cinema equipment. There's an ad for old cars, beautifully designed 40s cars. So that made me think that if there's an ad for cars, that is aimed at a fairly good audience, that what in the film industry is called gentry, because they were not consumer product ads only. Soap is maybe a consumer product, but there were these ads. What I found really interesting when I thought about it later, which is that there were no classified ads; they were all display ads, and of course the ads for the movies. The first announcement of the movie is there. People saying we are going to make this film that's coming. There was one ad I remember seeing saying that we are looking for one young girl and one young boy to come and sign up for the film. I don't know whether they happened. So ads, industry ads. There are a lot of industry ads. So the ads are equally chronicling the times. As much as the content, as much as the article is. See, for me, I must tell you, Patel's of Filmindia is a book not about just the Patels or about the magazine or about cinema. It's about India and its change over the last 30 to 50 years. Because towards the end, the magazine kind of fell on bad time. But even there, you find ads for products. I was amused to see there was an ad for a product called Eagle Flasks. Disappeared later on. It was a strong brand. So it's a book about many aspects of India and its development and its growth.
The book also has a lot of snippets from the Q&A column of Filmindia.
I think the Q&A column of Filmindia deserves a book on its own. It has got, it's outrageous, it's amazing. In terms of its frankness, very occasionally a touch of crudity too. Babu Rao Patel was not a man to hold back his thoughts on anything. Those, in an average issue or monthly issue, they were somewhere in 600 to 700. So you can well imagine that whole collection. In fact, I remember they did bring out a collection of question and answers. I think that much more can be done, some really interesting answers. Where did you go to your honeymoon with your wife? I mean, that kind of questions, who runs the household, you or your wife? Or what do you think of Nargis? And then he answers, and he's not complimentary. What do you think of such and such actor? What do you think of such and such film? So, what do you think of Pakistan? Because by that time Pakistan had come into being, so he had very strong views to say on Pakistan. A lot of people have thought that sometimes his views were a little outrageous in terms of community relations, but actually not. That's the thing. When you read it, you realize that he's not at all anti this or anti that, but he is certainly not pro the politics and the government of the day. The only person who passes his muster barely is Gandhiji, barely. But Nehru, later on Indira Gandhi, all are not people whom he has anything nice to say about. Nobody says nice things. So, politically conservative, socially liberal in a strange way, and his own man. There are interesting snippets to read around 46, 47, 48. Actually, there are interesting things to read around 1958, 59, 60 when Sayyid Maharashtra was happening. I felt that was that was not the ambit of the book, so I didn't touch upon it. But very, very strong and thought out view. If you read them, you say, okay, these were the debates happening at that time. I can read about them in books or in the big papers of the time, but here is another point of view. And that, for me, as an amateur historian, was very, very interesting.
So, are there any anecdotes from the book or incidents related to writing the book that you would like to share? Anything interesting?
So one of the anecdotes that stayed with me a lot while I was writing the book, there were lots of things. I mean, Sushila Rani told me lots and lots of things. She told me about how she came into she came home one day and found one young guy wearing chappals hanging around, waiting for Babu Rao, and she said, yes, what can I do for you? He said, my name is Dilip Kumar. I've come to meet Mr. Babu Rao Patel. Can you see me? And he was very nervous. And then he met him, and later on she got to know that he was there to get some advice on his love life. So that is there in the book. Please read it. Then she taught Madhubala English, and she said how she was a diligent student, came home to learn the lesson of the day, despite the fact that she may have finished shooting at 9 or 10. She was still there, and she was eager to learn. And if you see later on Madhubala's films, her accent, English accent is quite perfect. I mean, she speaks in English in a few films. But she was not particularly educated, and yet did it. So I found those stories fascinating. I found one story really fascinating, that their neighbor in 1946 in Umar Park, I think, in Beach Candy, Water Road, was Noorjahan. So when 47, when everyone moved, she didn't move, and she had made her plans to go. So she said, why not? So she said, no, I have 3 film projects to complete. So she continued working till 48, 49, and only then left. So I found that very, very interesting. Earlier she had told me about these 2 young boys who used to live in her building, who used to always kind of gaze at her a little, kind of surreptitiously. One of them was Devana. So I found those great stories, All that is in the book. And by the way, I must tell you, she was a pretty, she was a romantic. She liked to talk about these things. She was not some old fuddy-duddy. And I can never forget that every time she came to sit for an interview, she was dressed to the hilt. And my greatest regret is that I never got myself photographed with her. The pre-selfie days.
In the cinema.
No, I cannot say 3 great actors of Indian cinema, but I can certainly say that, and I'll stick to the 50s and 60s only because everyone knows about what's happening today. And I'm not going to say Dilip Kumar or Raj Kapoor or anybody else because we know about it. But I would say take some names, and I think those people deserve a really close look, second look. One is Motilal, who I think is a fantastic actor, very, very natural, deserves to be, taken far more seriously. I am personally a terrific admirer of Nalini Jayawant for some reason, because I've always felt that she was totally underrated. And in a strange way, I think Madhubala has also been underrated simply because of her good looks. But she could do silly stuff and tragic stuff. So all these people, one needs to go beyond the obvious image. Meena Kumari, terrific comedian, terrific. We need to go beyond their obvious images. Prithviraj Kapoor, people thought of him as this loud, large man, but he was capable of some really, really fine stuff. And so I feel Hindi cinema has been blessed because of our fantastic and old theatre tradition. It's been blessed with some really great actors. I always am a great evangelist for saying, people, please watch 40s, 50s, 60s movies, because that you should know where it's come from. Nowadays, when people write articles, they think life began in Dilwale Dulhaniya Le Jayenge. I think there's life before that also.